And meanwhile, within the royal mansion, a protest has ignited. This place sucks! We're sick of your rules! We're adults now! We want independence! Oh, good grief. Well, bloody hell. Okay, we'll get you set up. Ha ha ha. Oh, lovely. Oh. Okay, you're on your own now. Yay, freedom! Meanwhile... Greetings, my friends, and blessings to you on this 4th of July, which will be the subject of our investigation today. We dive deeper, looking at independence, freedom, words that matter, words that are defined, how they're applied. What's the context of the words? Is it legal application? So we're going to dive a little deeper, and we'll just go ahead and jump into it now. And let's start with the established narrative and what we are under the historical impression of. So let's look at the mainstream narrative first. So as we see here, 4th of July, recognized as July 4, 1776, the founding father delegates of the Second Continental Congress declared that the 13 colonies were no longer subject to the monarch of Britain, King George III, and were now united, free, and independent states. The Congress voted to approve independence by passing the Lee Resolution on July 2nd and adopted the Declaration of Independence 2 days later on July 4th. So what we have here is the significance of the date, meaning that this is when we, as the United States, decided to establish our position. So this is when we declared it. So it was voted upon, and the position agreed upon that we would become independent of the monarch of Britain. So now let's move a little forward and see what happened after we made this declaration and what other information comes available. So the reason we're looking into this further is the reason this is in question regarding independence and are we independent of Britain as it's been established. So this idea is based on that the United States is a corporation and that it is essentially owned or a subsidiary of the London Corporation or the City of London Corporation. And first to establish that this is not just a conspiracy theory or anything of that context, that this is actually legally established. So we need to first take a look at that and establish that so we know that we're not just dealing with nonsense. So first, we see here. This, if you actually type this as you see it here and search for it, you will find the actual document that states this. We will look at that now. So this is an excerpt from that document, okay? And this is a legal document. These are definitions on the definition page establishing the actual legally defined terminology in this document and as it pertains. So as you see there highlighted, number 15, United States, means a federal corporation, okay? So that's the excerpt. So again, that is directly from the before mentioned. Directly from here. So this, if you look, will bring you to this document here. U.S. Government Information page. So this is again, the Title 28, Judiciary and Judicial Procedure, and we are in the definitions section. So as we were looking at is here. There it is. Okay. So this isn't a fantasy or anything like that. Legally established documentation. Okay. So now that has been established, and you can find that for yourself, and make sure that you do your own research. And you will see that this is something you can find. It's in the public domain, and it is legal documentation. So you will definitely be able to find it. So with that, let's get rid of a few things here. So next, let's move back and let's take a look at our next established item. So, without question, here you are, okay? City of London Corporation, and this is very much in the public domain. This is not secret. So, and one thing we want to look at specifically here, and I'll draw some attention to it. So the City of London Corporation, officially and legally, the mayor and commonalty and citizens of the City of London is the local authority of the City of London, the historic center of London, and the location of much of the United Kingdom's financial sector. In 2006, the name was changed from Corporation of London, as the corporate body needed to be distinguished from the geographical area to avoid confusion with the wider London local government, the Greater London Authority. It is a corporation in the sense of being a municipal corporation rather than a company. It is deemed to be the citizens and other eligible parties acting as one corporate body to manage the city's affairs. So notice there as well, city is capitalized, making it proper noun. And also notice in 2006, they made a change to the name to make it no longer ambiguous. So in 2006, they finally drew some distinction there. So people understood there was a difference and there was a corporation involved. So for all the time before that, no need, ambiguous language in place. So that is very much established and on the record. So what we then need to look at is what came in kind of the order of operation. So kind of the first thing we have to start with is the first charter of Virginia. And you can find the full excerpt document. This is just an excerpt. You can find the full document very easily, especially if you just look this up. You'll find PDF versions if you want to see it. We're just going to take an overview just to see what it's about. So, first charter of Virginia was granted by King James I of England on April 10th, 1606 to the Virginia Company of London. Charter divided the North American coast between two companies, Virginia Company of London and the Virginia Company of Plymouth, overseen by the Council of Virginia. 13 members were appointed by the king. Okay, so key provisions. Charter granted the Virginia Company the authority to govern its own colony. The company was permitted to establish a colony in Virginia with the power to appoint a council of leaders, a governor, and other officials. Charter defined the relationship between the colony and the crown, providing for a government and establishing the boundaries of the colony. The charter also provided for the appointment of a colonial council to make daily decisions, with the governor having absolute power. Significance. The first charter of Virginia marked the beginning of English colonization in North America. Okay, so it established the principle of royal patronage, where the king granted a charter to a private company to establish a colony. The charter also set the precedent for the establishment of a representative government in the colony with the appointment of a colonial council and the election of a governor. Okay? So this is the beginning of the monarchy's establishment of colonization in North America. Okay? So that puts all of the people in the United States at that point under British authority. Okay? So it is then, of course, later on that we actually get into the actuals of when and how legally documented the United States became actually free, which takes us to the Treaty of Paris. So, as I said, you can find the First Virginia Charter if you'd like. It's easy to find. You can find PDF versions of it as you see here. But now, the Paris Treaty, okay? This is what is outlining the United States and its separation from, sorry, it's going to load for a second here. So, and I mean, you can take screenshots if you like, but this is easy stuff to find. So, this is laying out all the articles and differences and what's to be set aside. It's establishing boundary lines and so on. So this is the Treaty of Paris where we actually, on legal documentation, in 1783, became independent, quote unquote, of Britain. So, with that being said, the questions that then come into play based on all of this, okay? So, I've taken you through the document here, so like I said, feel free to go back and review if you'd like. Some of the questions come into play then, because later on, we have what is known as Jay's Treaty. Jay's Treaty is 1794. So, Reader's Digest, also known as the Treaty of Amity, Commerce and Navigation. Okay? Key points. This is 1794. So, treaty was negotiated by the Supreme Court Chief Justice John Jay, signed into London by Lord Grenville, the British Foreign Minister, and John Jay. The treaty established a base for the United States to build a sound national economy and assured its commercial prosperity. Britain agreed to evacuate the Northwest Territory by June 1, 1796, and to compensate the United States for its depredations against American shipping. The treaty prohibited the outfitting of privateers for Britain's enemies in U.S. ports and provided for payment of debts incurred by Americans to British merchants before the American Revolution. The treaty also established joint commissions to determine the boundaries between the U.S. and British in the Northwest and Northeast. The treaty declared the Mississippi River open to both countries and prohibited the British from interfering with American trade and shipping. Okay, so significance. Jay's Treaty helped to maintain strong trade ties between the United States and Great Britain and prevented war between the two nations. The treaty also marked the beginning of a new era of cooperation between the U.S. and Great Britain, which would continue throughout the 19th century. The treaty's provisions on arbitration and boundary disputes set important precedents for future international agreements. Okay? That's Jay's Treaty, 1794. So let's take a look at Jay's Treaty. And again, these are easy to find. You can find the documents, PDF's easy. And some of the questions that it draws. And we don't have to go into great depths on this. Like I said, we're not going to review the whole document. I just want you to see that it is available. You can find it. And the questions that it brings into play. So, essentially, the Paris Treaty in 1783 was declaring the United States' independence from Great Britain. However, in this treaty, there's some language that kind of identifies the King and the Queen of England as capital Prince of the United States. But nevertheless, there's also some other issues with the timeline and this Jay's Treaty following, because if 1781 was establishing our independence from Great Britain, why would we need to then be involved in another treaty over a decade later? So, Paris Treaty 1783, Jay's Treaty 1794. So, the reason this kind of brings some questions in. So the issue is, if a war was fought in 1781 and America became victor, why would Britain need to sign a treaty in 1783? When the U.S. has won a war, America should not require the British monarch to cede land and refer to himself as Prince of the Holy Roman Empire of the United States. So within Jay's Treaty, this is some of the language that's applied. There's other terms within this document that usage of the term Esquire, that is a title established with nobility, that's also again showing some allegiance to the king and queen, and some of the founding fathers as well, Benjamin Franklin, John Jay Esquire, and John Adams, signing on behalf of the U.S., use the name Esquire, which apparently raises some validity to how valid the 1783 treaty is. And so the two of these raises some questions. If the Paris Treaty established our freedom then why the 1794 treaty, almost 13 years later, that needs to be signed if we were already independent in 1783. So these are just some of the questions that are overlooked throughout the historical narrative, and then what we can actually verify for ourselves if we actually look at the details. Another question posed is, what needs to be further investigated is why the U.S. still continues to pay tax to the capital C city. Like we said, capital C with a, proper noun, capital C city. So why is the U.S. still paying tax to the city if it is a free nation? The 1794 treaty signed between England and the U.S. was negotiated by John Jay Esquire, who negotiated the 1783 treaty. The question is, why would the U.S. need to sign treaties with England 13 years after the Paris Treaty of 1783 declaring U.S. independent? Why would Article 6 and Article 12 continue to dictate terms to an independent America? So these are some little excerpts and questions that have been posed for a good long while now, establishing what actually is this language implying. And based on the implied language and the established that we are still a corporation, and as we saw, the City of London is, without question, a corporation. And one, as it stated in the first Charter of Virginia, essentially the City of London Corporation gave the seed fund, basically, to these corporate companies as they were established, beginning in the 13 colonies that were originally set up. So again, you've got Virginia Company of London. You have the Company of Plymouth, overseen by the Council of Virginia. So the 13 members were appointed by the king. Later, we established our own independence, and then the Treaty of Paris established our independence on legal documentation in 1783. And then later, We have Jay's Treaty in 1794 with a lot of ambiguous language implying that there is still loyalties and questions. So, just something to be aware of as we celebrate certain things. Obviously, the significance of the people who have, fought for our country, and the people who've served certainly deserve our respect and appreciation, and, their sacrifices is certainly something that should be appreciated. The question is, did we get duped in documentation? So, when I say the devil's in the details, all of the information that we just looked at is in the public domain, and it's public record, and anybody can find it and see it if we decide to look. So, question is, are we looking and are we asking questions where there are places to ask questions? So, this will, of course, if you follow this line of research, you will then eventually end up finding yourself in areas involving the U.S. Senate and the institution of the Fed and things of that nature. So definitely do your own research and, start where I did and just take yourself through these things, and you can see that these are all, very well-established legal documentations, and they certainly give you pause. So something to think about. Blessings to you, and dive deeper.